Goals! It's my favorite time of year. Welcome back, BookTube, for my yearly goals discussion. I'm going to do my 2022 goals wrap up after the start of the year, once I've actually finished a full year. But setting out my new goals for 2023, I think, is reasonable to do before the year has ended. This has been my first year really struggling with what I want my goals to be. So that kind of shows in that I'm keeping it very light and very loose for myself in terms of the goals. Normally I have quite a lot more goals, but we're really paring it down because I don't feel a big interest or incentive to follow my goals at the yearly level. I feel like following things like readathons and mini challenges on a monthly basis are probably serving me better as it stands, because I've really hit all of my reading goals. I'm reading a ton, and that was as a conscious effort a few years ago to get myself reading more, because I had kind of fallen off of reading entirely as an adult when I started my career, and then had to put some serious effort into building that habit back up. And I'm definitely there. So the goal you will not see here is a challenge number goal in terms of the books I want to read. I also don't set up specific books. I kind of do, in that I have a physical TBR shelf for the year. And I will actually reset that on New Year's Day, I think. I think that's going to become a new tradition for me to reset my TBR shelf for the year on New Year's Day, because it's a kind of slow, quiet day, and it gives me a lot of time to sift through and look at what I want to prioritize off my own shelves. So I don't buy new books for that. I don't set out a certain number that I want to read. It's just simply, these are things I want to prioritize from my own shelves. So whenever I've picked out specific books, specific series I want to get to, other than that, it just never works. So I'm not going to do that. I also don't set out my goals in a way that is having to read a set number of books per month toward a goal. We're going to kind of tweak that this year slightly. We're going to play into it a little bit. But overall, my goals are, over the course of the year, going to average out, but my reading ebbs and flows and changes based on what readathons or challenges are going on a monthly basis. So I don't need to read, X number per month. I'm going to read maybe 0 in one month and then read a whole pile the next month, and I'm fine with that. So I'm looking at kind of averaging out when it comes to the few number goals that I do have. So what are the goals? The goals, goal number 1 and 2, are very opposite goals, but they're kind of for the same reason. Goal number 1 is buy more books. I know everyone in the world is kind of doing the opposite of this, but this one it's not just go out and be a consumer. That's not what the goal is. I'm not setting a number to this, and you may have already noticed that I've kind of enacted this a bit. I've been picking up more ebooks that were favorites that I had already read, and buying them in print because I loved them so much. I've been picking up some indie published books. I subscribe to the Coffee House Press catalog, and so things like that, where they're not a book I'm going to come across in the wild, basically, ever. In the past, and the reason for this goal is that I would just kind of go, well, I'm interested in that book, but I'm never going to see it at a secondhand store. I'm never going to see it at the library, so I'm just not going to read it. And so I missed out on a lot of books that I potentially would have loved, I think, because I was just so focused on, well, I can get so many books for free. Why don't I just reach out for those? Like, my backlog of TBR and everything is so overloaded that I don't need to reach for those books. But I love supporting authors, and I found some books that I've really enjoyed by even going outside of my comfort zone to buy that just 99-cent book that's on ebook sale, and that's something I rarely would do before. I would only focus on getting free ebooks or things I could get from my library. So I do want to use the fact that most of my expendable income, which I'm lucky to have, does actually go to books. And usually that's stuff I get secondhand. And I can actually focus that toward decreasing what I'm pulling in secondhand, maybe, and make more conscious choices about supporting specific authors or indies, that sort of thing. So my money is going there. So that's the first one in that sort of area. The opposite end is bestsellers. So I had to really think about how to target this. I don't reach for bestsellers because they're just going to always be on the shelf, basically. So I realized this past year, over the course of 2022, that basically I had read almost nothing from any of the prizes. I read almost nothing from even the BookTube prize fiction list. So general fiction, I've not been picking up, and especially popular fiction. So I don't tend to always love everything that makes it to popular fiction, but I think it gives me a wide breadth of types of stories, and I feel like I've been missing out on that in my sort of reading diet. And so I really want to target that, and the best way I could come up with is that my library does have a bestseller shelf physically at their locations. So that gives me a lot of selection because it changes very often. It includes both fiction and nonfiction. It's not just new releases, stuff that regains popularity because there's been something in the news, or there has been, an adaptation has come out that will put it back on the shelf. And almost always, I've never read anything that's on those shelves because I'm just like, there's a billion copies of these books in these libraries, so I can just grab it whenever. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of wiggle room. If the bestseller shelf at my library doesn't have anything I'm interested in, I'm going to alternately use the Too Hot to Hold shelf on Libby, which is also through my library and so free, but that it basically means you can immediately check out those books because they are very popular, effectively bestsellers. So I want to keep an eye on this. If I do wind up just not liking any of the books I'm picking up, which I highly doubt, I will shift this goal toward actually being prize books later on the year. But for now, I do want to keep it at bestsellers and try and focus on that. And this is the one also where I'm going to kind of make it a monthly goal. You know how fast I read. I read very quickly. So I go through enough books that I think I can make it be one bestseller per month without that seriously hampering my reading. And what I'm going to do in order to give myself the flexibility, the leeway for that to fit in real easily is if I don't have a bestseller on my TBR for the month or picked up by the 1st of the month, I will give myself to the 15th of the month, so halfway through, and then I have to go to the library and go browse the bestseller shelf and bring something home. So I don't necessarily have to read it right then, but I need to pick something up and bring it home every month and make sure I'm continuing to progress through those. So that's goal number 2. Goal number 3 is going to be finishing series. And I want to target 12 series finishes because in 2022, I had a very broad sequels goal, and I think that served me well, and I did read a lot of sequels. I also did finish 10 series in the course of that. So I think hitting 12, and actually I think I'm going to finish one more before the end of 2022. So 12 is very attainable with where I'm at right now. It's going to mean I have to keep it in my mind and keep a focus on doing that, but it's not totally going to be very difficult to achieve. I think Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures inspired me to take a look at what books were remaining in series that I had read. So I took a look. I actually had kind of 2 tacks about this. The first one, I started doing the past 3 years of reading, looking at any non-first book in series. And then I went back 5 years and looked at everything that I'd read that was a series that I'd read at least the first book, not just sequels beyond the first. And split that down, made a list of any of those series that I had read in the past 5 years that I do want to continue. And not only is it a huge list, I still have been realizing that I missed things when I was going through my Goodreads list. Either I glossed over them, whatever. It's at 68 books right now, just for the next book in the series. Not all of the books to finish the series, just the sequel that's next in series. So yeah, I want to knock that down a little bit by reading more sequels and closing those series off. So that may mean to finish these series and knock out these 12 series finishes, I read multiple books in a series. Like if I've only read the first in the trilogy, I want to read through the whole trilogy this year and get it off my list. because I want to make room for more series. I want to experience the full series, the continuation and closure of a series that I started and thought I loved. And so I do really want to prioritize that, because that's something I always am lagging behind at. My last goal, I only have 4 goals this year, is going to be my own ebooks. And so I took a look at how much I had read this year. I did make an active effort at kind of prioritizing ebooks this year, a little bit more than I have, and I still think that was behind what I want. So I do want to kind of average out to around 2 a month, but again, I don't specify that that needs to happen, but I want to hit about 24. So I have so many, and I have kind of pushed up some that were major priorities for me in the past, some cozy reading that I had picked up, some sequels that I haven't got to that will help me out with my other goals. So yeah, I have a ton of owned ebooks. I have over 300 to get to that are unread. So I definitely have a spoil for choice situation going on here, and I just don't always get to them because, you know, when you're browsing your physical shelves, it's easy to see what's there, and ebooking, it's a little bit more difficult. So I've made some time to shift through what I want to prioritize early into the year, and so that is going to be a big element of my reading this year, I think. So those are my actual goals. The things that I have to kind of keep an eye on and general ideas is my physical TBR shelf. As always, I want to read more from my physical TBR shelf in the next year than I did in the current year. And we're getting to kind of a cutoff for that, I think. But I think we're still within reason in 2023 to say that, where I don't know where I'm at, so I don't want to give a specific number yet until my goals wrap up, but I do think it's doable to read more in 2023 than I did in 2022. So we're going to do that once I have set my physical TBR shelf. I'm also doing away with my library TBR. Previously, I had unowned books that I was planning to get through my library that I wanted to prioritize. So I'm not doing that this year because I want to prioritize those ebooks. Those would kind of be taking that space. So I'm just leaving that much more broad and focusing on my own books, either that being my own physical TBR, my own ebooks. And we all know I go to my library all the time. I do not have a problem with picking up books from the library. So if I want to prioritize a book from the library, I will do that. I don't think I need an actual list to do that. I do, however, have kind of compounded the problem of that because I made myself a list of 2022 releases that I really want to prioritize getting to in the next year. So that's almost a replacement for the library TBR. I think some of them I may buy outright, back to my first goal. But I do think that those ones are going to be a mixed priority of whether I want to get to those over my own books or whether I want to prioritize getting to those early in the year versus later in the year. We'll see. They're not going to be a specific goal, but they're just something that's in my mind and in my plans. And my last sort of thing that's on my mind to track and figure out whether I want to turn it into a specific goal later in the year is historical fiction, historical fantasy, historical nonfiction, because I love historical. And I think I talked about this in a similar way in 2022's goals. We'll check when I go back and watch my 2022 goal video to wrap up after the end of the year. But I do love those genres. I want to read them a significant amount, and I think I did okay in 2022. So I would like to kind of keep it at a similar level to possibly more. So I'm going to continue tracking and making sure I am maintaining at least. And if I decide I'm not hitting that, I'm going to add a specific number goal for the second half of the year in order to kind of add that back into my reading diet some more if I start lagging. So that is it for my goals. This is going to be way longer than I had hoped, but well, there were a lot of rambles about my reading plans, and I just love the planning process usually, so this year has been kind of weird, but talking about it definitely gets me more excited about these plans, and I'm loving hearing everybody else's goals. So tell me what creative solutions you have for dealing with the series and sequels especially, because I think that's always the one that I grapple with. How do I target that? So yeah, I'd love to hear about how people are individually targeting dealing with that on their own TBRs. And I think that's it for my reading goals for 2023. I'm so excited to jump in. I can hardly wait for the next week to pass up in order to jump into starting these goals and checking them off the list. That's it for me today, BookTube. Thanks so much for watching.